West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
Good evening, everyone. We begin the readout tonight. 5 full weeks into Putin's horrific war in Ukraine that's targeting civilians, killing 148 children so far, according to Ukraine's defense ministry. And we just learned that 1 person died and 4 were injured when Russian militants shot at a column of volunteers near Chernihiv today who were trying to help civilians evacuate. This war is not going well for Putin. His soldiers are sabotaging their own equipment, according to the UK spy chief. And a U.S. official told NBC that we have information that indicates that some Russian government senior officials likely disagreed with Putin's decision to invade Ukraine. Their disillusionment is probably amplified by the Russian military's underperformance. The Kremlin is on defensive, denying reports that Putin is being told false information about how poorly it's going because people are too scared to tell him the truth. Meanwhile, Putin signed a decree today drafting more than 134,000 new conscripts into the Russian army. They're being told that they are not being sent into Ukraine, but it's important to note that Putin also denied that conscripts had been sent in earlier in the war, and that turned out to be a lie. In fact, the use of conscripts may be why the invasion went so poorly in the first place. They tend to be younger, less motivated, and poorly trained. The Ukrainian government announced today that they're regaining territory, liberating 2 villages in the Chernihiv region, and claiming that Russian equipment is currently being moved away from Kyiv, and that Ukraine is recapturing villages there. Yesterday, my colleague Richard Engel visited an abandoned Russian camp on the outskirts of Kharkiv.
This was a Russian camp, and you could see they had all of their weapons here, dugout positions, and they were bombed. There's still some bodies in this area, and they left a lot of their equipment behind after what appears to have been a devastating attack on their position. There's nothing left.
While the area might be back, in Ukrainian control, what civilians have gone through is harrowing.
88-year-old Praskovia was sitting by herself, disoriented and frightened. I'm so afraid. My whole body is shaking. At night, I cover myself in a blanket and I shake, she says. Mostly, she wanted comfort. Praskovia says she lived through World War II and doesn't have the strength to go through it all again.
And it's certainly far from over. Kharkiv is under constant attack, with Ukraine saying Russia fired 47 strikes last night alone, and that Russia is refusing to allow humanitarian corridors there. Humanitarian corridors did open up today in Mariupol, which has been relentlessly besieged by the Russians. President Zelensky said today that thousands of civilians have died there. NBC News is unable to verify that number. Just under 1,500 people were able to evacuate the region today through 3 corridors. But Russian soldiers seized 14 tons of humanitarian aid, including food and medicine. This is all a part of Russia's focus on the eastern part of the country, where Ukrainian officials say Russia is considering sending their own officials to preside over occupied territory. Russia claimed to take over another territory in Donetsk today. Of the Ukrainian government, where the head of the Ukrainian government says they're using white phosphorus munitions. This is a claim that NBC News has no way of verifying. White phosphorus is not banned by international law, but if the weapon is used to target civilians, it can represent a violation of the laws of war. The Kremlin has said that they haven't violated any international conventions. The capital, Kyiv, meanwhile, even as Russia struggles to advance on the ground, they've still been striking Kyiv. And the NATO Secretary General said today that Russian forces are not withdrawing. They are just regrouping. Here's what President Biden had to say on that today.
It's an open question whether he's actually pulling back and going to say, I'm just going to focus on the Donbass and I'm not worried about the rest of the country. I'm a skeptic. It appears so far that he has not pulled all of the idea. He's pulling all the troops out from around Kyiv and moving south. There's no evidence that he's done that.
Joining me now from Lviv is Ali Velshi, MSNBC correspondent and the host of Velshi. And Ali, my friend, it is so hard to sort of understand what the narrative is here, because the narratives all appear to be sort of all at the same time. Russia is failing in its military objective, but they're killing and slaughtering a lot of people and destroying lots of territory. They're either pulling back or they're just stalling in order to go in harder. Is it possible from where you are to get a sense of which of these things is true, or all of them true?
Yeah, or is it confusion, or is it deliberate disinformation? It's very, very hard to tell. And what you were hearing and showing, what you just described, is the sort of conflicting types of intelligence that we're getting, right? They're British intelligence suggesting that some of these conscripts, these Russian soldiers, are sort of protesting. They're sabotaging themselves. The idea that they were pulling away from Kyiv and neighboring areas in order to build trust during those negotiations, well, we have evidence that didn't happen. There was shelling that was continuing to occur in those places. This idea that they want to focus back on the Donbass and the eastern region of the country, and that the focus on Kyiv and other places was just meant to be a distraction. It becomes impossible to tell what the truth actually is here. And as you said, we can't confirm all of those things, but you can see Richard Engel's actual reporting. We have seen reporting from our colleagues at Sky News that shows the actual destruction of residences, apartment buildings, and things like that. And it sort of plays out even here in Lviv, which was thought of as a very peaceful place, which seems like a very peaceful place during the day. Right now, obviously, we're under curfew, so nobody can move around. But even people here who came here for safety have been saying things like there's no safe place in Ukraine. So at this point, it becomes very, very unclear as to what is actually going on. The important thing, and it's a message that's coming from the U.S. government, but it does seem to bear out on the ground here, is that the morale of the Ukrainian soldiers, with the assistance of the weaponry and training that they're getting from the West, is seeming to hold them together. Now, they've warned several times that they're running out of stuff. Yesterday, that conversation with President Zelensky and President Bush, which lasted an hour, did result in $500 million more being sent to Ukraine. But that money, interestingly enough, is to run their government. This is not a rich country. This is the poorest country in Europe, and they are struggling to run their country and conduct this defense against Russia. So it's unclear. I think the only thing we're clear on is one way or the other, this is not going the way the Russians thought it was going to go, because we had reports of 72 hours or 96 hours before they take the whole place. It's not clear whether Vladimir Putin understood that not to be true, or he thinks he's been duped by his own people. But something's not working for the Russians, and that is about as much as we can be clear on.
Yeah, you know, Mother Russia has been fooled before by the same sort of scenario. It's almost as if they thought, well, Afghanistan, the capital of Afghanistan fell quickly. We're just going to do that. And now they've sort of built themselves another Afghanistan the way the Soviet Union had it, a mess.
It is Friday, the 1st of April of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and that is no joke. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Yes, indeed. I know it's a day of pranks, but I'm not going to do any pranks here during the show. All right? Maybe out in the world, possibly. I'm not really into the prank thing. Never was. but nah, you know, I mean, you have some peers and contemporaries, and you might play the game because, hey, why not? But, yeah, it's April Fools. So who's the fool? You or me? Or are we all? If you play the joke, that's what you are. Anyway, I guess it's supposed to be a day of mirth, even though the war, as I keep saying, continues apace. CNN just had some reportage here not very long ago about that fuel depot that was blown up by the Russians in Ukraine as being another Biden crisis. Another one. Yeah, Joe can't get a break. Highest job numbers in over 50 years. Oh, it's a crisis. Barrel of oil is dropping precipitously, but the price at the pump keeps going up. It's a Biden crisis. Okay. Sounds like a vast right-wing conspiracy to me, but, you know. All right. That got Hillary in trouble, even though she was correct. And we all knew it back in the day when she said a vast right-wing conspiracy. All you had to do was look around and see, I don't know, Birchers doing what Birchers were doing and being embraced even more by the mainstream Republican Party. Eek. You had the Federalist Society and Heritage Foundation coming up. Oh, my God. We saw it in real time. And what was it for? It was all in retaliation for them getting caught in Watergate. Because they were breaking into their political opponents' offices to dig up dirt, and so therefore everybody was. And they just got caught. And so now they try to catch Democrats into doing something like Hunter Biden, and they can't find anything, so they manufacture it. Or they exaggerate it beyond all visible. It leaves nothing visible that's rational. I know that doesn't make sense. It's still the morning, and I still need some more coffee. Yeah, I don't quite understand how we're getting leaks about Justice Department inquiries into Hunter Biden. About how the DOJ is ratcheting up that investigation because of his taxes. Hunter Biden's taxes. Hey, get in line. I don't understand. I mean, we've been trying to get Trump's taxes since way before anybody even knew Hunter Biden was Hunter Biden. People might have heard of Beau, but hardly anybody did. And if they did, they really didn't care. Now everybody cares about what Hunter Biden is doing. They even stole Joe Biden's daughter's diary, Project Veritas, and tried to manipulate that into something. And believe me, it's still in the works. Russia, if you're listening. And they just go out and say it in public, and nothing is done. And yet Hunter Biden has to be under the aegis of a ratcheted up DOJ investigation. So when Merrick Garland came out and said that he will show no favor to any politician to prosecute them for crimes, we all thought he was talking about Trump. And he was talking about Hunter. All right. Because I guess if we try to hold Trump responsible for his crimes, that would cause our whole society to collapse. I don't know how that works. We can't hold the president to a crime. People will not trust America anymore. Well, they didn't trust America at all with Trump. Remember when he pushed the president or prime minister of Montenegro when they were at a G7 summit? Or where, I don't know, it was some Davos maybe even. World Economic Council. Came up behind the president of Montenegro and just picked him up by his shoulders and moved him right out of the way. I'm the guy. I'm the top dog. And he does a little suit snap there. You know, I'm the top dog. Get out of my way. Everybody hated that guy. Vladimir Putin is shaking his boots about Joe, and I keep saying this too. I'll keep repeating it. There's a reason Vladimir Putin, his efforts caused Donald Trump to get impeached twice, not once, but twice, because Vladimir Putin did not want to have to face Joe Biden in a showdown, and now he's in a showdown. And we have fifth columnists here, as elected officials, by the way, working to subvert American foreign policy during a war. There's a word for that. Starts with a T, ends with an R. And I don't mean the New Republic. Okay? When I say ends with an R, it doesn't start with the last word as an R. It's one word, starts with a T, ends with an R. With ator in between, or ato in between. Okay, more coffee. We need more coffee. Speaking of which, maybe I'm going to have to start thinking of getting a substitute for a coffee. Yeah, not that Nostrum stuff. Ugh. Or was it Postum? Postum! That's it, the coffee substitute. Didn't really substitute for the coffee, trust me. Now, it is also somewhat true that though tea, black teas in particular, have a bit lower caffeine content, they do have another psychoactive chemical as a stimulant that sort of makes up for it. So in many ways, tea is a bit more of a punch for your buck than coffee is. So, environmental catastrophe, climate catastrophe is maybe we're going to see diminished coffee crops, which means coffee will be going through the roof. Yeah. Remember in Soylent Green when the most expensive commodities was like, a teaspoon of jam? People would like sell their bodies for a teaspoon of jam. Yeah. Imagine what's going to be for with coffee. Jesus. I was also thinking, great leaders like Vladimir Putin, when he talks about when Russia was great, like with Peter the Great, Catherine the Great, etc., Russia practiced slavery then. And I'm not talking just the serfs, all right? The Russian serf. That's slavery in and of itself, but I mean out-and-out slavery, by making those that they conquered do their bidding and work for them. And I bet Vlad thinks that, great works, great edifices that will cause people to look and say, oh, yeah, Vladimir Putin was a great man. Look at all this stuff that he built. Well, the great edifices in history were built through slave labor by the conquered, pressed into labor by the conqueror. And so, all's fair in love and war, I guess they say. Yeah, they love to be able to enslave people. When I say they, I mean autocrats who want to make a bunch of money, too. I'm looking at you, U.S. corporations. You would love to be able to get a labor force you didn't have to pay for. At least, I don't know, you might have to house them for a while, but I don't think the housing is going to be very great because there'll always be a turnover in labor. And when you work one team to death, you got some others back waiting in the wings saying, I need the money too. Yeah, I don't think corporations want to see living wages because then people won't want to work for them. They always say, oh, they're so lazy, they don't want to work. No, they don't want to work for you. Okay? You got to learn to finish your sentences, as Paul Hawken used to say. I can't seem to get anybody to work. When the complete sentence is, I can't seem to get anybody to work with what I want to pay them. Yeah, finish your sentence. You might find out what the problem is. What you want to pay them is considerably lower than what they are worth, aren't they? But then on the other hand, you can always tell a bad employer. I was told once that the way you can tell that you're a good manager is that you have a team that you trust that can step in and do the job in your absence if it happened to come up in an emergency. Or just going on vacation. I remember a time it's like, well, what I'm doing is my sandlot. I don't want anyone else coming in here and mucking it up. And then in the process, it's like, wow, I haven't taken a vacation in a couple of years. What the hell? Because I didn't want to leave my sandlot. I didn't trust anybody to do the job the way I wanted it done, which meant I wasn't training anyone to do that. Why? Because I feared someone might take my place? That might have been it. Or it just might have been the ego of like, no one can do it the way I can do it. Well, if they're not doing it the way you can do it, then you're not training them well enough, are you? I learned that lesson real quick. In my early 20s, okay? Yeah, you gotta make sure that if you deem something important, that the momentum of it continues when you're not able to be there to, push the momentum along. Keep the momentum going until you can get back on your feet. All right. Well, this is the end of the week, isn't it? We have a whole weekend ahead of us, and who knows what's going to happen. Oh, boy. The Russians are leaving Chernobyl. They started digging into... Don't ask me why they're digging into red dirt right outside the Chernobyl facility. Digging trenches. We're going to dig trenches here. And then a bunch of the troops started getting radiation poisoning. I wonder why. I mean, it says it right there in Cyrillic. Don't any of these conscripts read their own language? God, radioactive. Stay away. No digging. Yeah, it's not to hit power cables. Jesus. So it looks like not only is... we'll get to the curated part of the show, but there's a few things that are on the top of my mind, as you can tell. Vladimir Putin is drafting several 100,000 more new conscripts to replace the ones he's killed already in the battlefield. Oh, my God. Throw them out there as fodder. I need more fodder. But not only that. Vladimir Putin is now enlisting as actual fighters on the ground troops from not only Chechnya and other former Soviet states, but Syria. And Syria is gladly sending some of their troops to go fight the Ukrainians because of all the great work that Vlad did for Assad there in Syria. And what did Vlad do? Yeah, phosphorus bombs and all sorts of other shit. White phosphorus. Eee. So you did some great work there. We'll come and help you. Okay. We'll take some of the heat off you. We'll drop a few white phosphorus bombs ourselves. Just to show them who's boss. So we can't restrict airspace, not just... how about this? We're not going to restrict airspace over Ukraine. We're just not going to allow anybody to come into Ukraine. Why can't we do that? You mean if we scramble fighters to... And we do this all the time. We scramble jets to ward Russia off of our shores, our international borders in the air, all the time. And we buzz them. We don't shoot them out of the sky. Now, is it possible that they would shoot some of our planes out of the sky? That is a concern, because you can't trust Vlad. All right. Yeah, he may be scaling back some military operations only because he's got to buy some time for the Syrians and others to come to his aid. So he can enlist other countries to come in and be boots on the ground. But we can't get involved any more than we are because it might be the beginning of World War III. Just saying. Of course, our guys already know that. And maybe they know enough to, in Sun Tzu's The Art of War, sometimes you just back off a little bit, let your opponent weaken themselves and destroy themselves through their own inability to do the right action. So maybe that's it. Let's only hope. Okay, it is Friday, and what is on the rest of the menu here as we begin this Blue Moon Spirits Friday? Well, of course, the war is not going the way Vlad thought it would, as we just explained. For the bulk of the beginning, on the rest of the menu, Pennsylvania GOP Senate candidate repeated the false claim that he served as an Army Ranger. A lot of stolen valor on the other side, along with their drug-fueled sex orgies. A National Security Agency employee has been charged with mishandling classified material. We've got to stop that. And a historian sued the New York prisons over the ban of a Pulitzer-prize winning book about the Attica uprising. Yeah, Bureau of Prisons don't want their prisoners reading that. After the break, we move to the chef's table where a Chinese-Australian journalist went on trial in Beijing on espionage charges, with diplomats denied permission to attend the proceedings. And the Turkish prosecutor in the slaying of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi made a surprise request that the trial in absentia be suspended and the case transferred to Saudi Arabia, raising fears of a possible cover-up. You think? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Oh, as just a reminder here as we end the week, Kelly will be reporting from Pittsburgh at Netroots Nation this year, so stay tuned for that. First in-person Netroots Nation in 2 years, so hopefully we'll all be safe. Kelly is taking the precautions needed, even though they say, hey, go out and have fun, pretend it never happened. But so that is actually quite fun. So stay tuned for interviews and on-site reportage from Netroots Nation here in Pittsburgh this year. If you would look across the page near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you'll notice the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it would really help. I know times are tough, but if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send us the monies from that purchase, instead of making the purchase, send us the money is what I'm trying to say. We then are able to stretch those dollars beyond compare, and then we pay our bills and fly under the radar so that we can continue this powerhouse of resistance against dark forces arrayed against not only the United States of America, but representative democracy worldwide. And that's no joke, okay? That's no April Fool's joke. That is the truth. And there are dark forces, and we need to be a bulwark against that. And that's our civic duty, and thank you for allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many years ago. And it was a long time. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter. I post, at Justice Putnam, by the way. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. And the show notes and links, of course, is where the real reportage can be found. And the full article, too, because sometimes we abbreviate when we're adding on. Just saying. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. And, of course, the deep archive of all Netroots radio shows, not only West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, but all of our shows over these many 11 years that we've been broadcasting 24/7, 365. Can be found at the Internet Archive at archive.org. You know, yesterday they had, now they're saying it was a scheduled power outage by PG&E near their center in San Francisco. And so it had been down, and at first, I mean, there wasn't really a ready announcement that this was going to happen. And so people would access the Internet Archive to either load shows into their archive library or whatever, and you couldn't get there. It was, they said that your shows were taken down for a violation of terms of use, maybe. I mean, that's what the announcement on it went. Wait a second, 11 years of our whole library just disappeared with no announcement and no recourse to get it back. And then it turned out they had a power outage. Okay. Apparently, according to them, it was scheduled, but it also happened at the same time that some hacking was going on in the world. Is that convenient? Yes, very. Whenever it's convenient with a trademark, that means Vlad was involved. So those were some very convenient hackings yesterday. Very. All right. Let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this fine April Fool's Day. No pranks. It's the 1st of April. This is out of the Associated Press and see. Oh, okay, just only staff from the AP put this together. And they are hardworking anyway, so there you go. Chinese-Australian journalist Chang Li went on trial in Beijing on Thursday yesterday on espionage charges, with diplomats denied permission to attend the proceedings. Wait a second. I thought they only did that to professional women basketball stars. Oh, they do it to everybody in Russia too? Okay. Australian ambassador Graham Fletcher told reporters outside the Beijing Second Intermediate People's Court, that he was told he could not be present on the grounds that the trial involved state secrets. Oh, is that it? This is deeply concerning, unsatisfactory, and very regrettable, Fletcher said. We can have no confidence in the validity of the process, which is conducted in secret. Australia will continue to advocate for Chang's rights and interests in accordance with the consular agreement between China and Australia, Fletcher said. Trials in China are typically completed in one day, and if you're guilty, you have to buy the bullet. You got to pay for the bullet they're going to kill you with. I'm just saying. I don't think they're going to. Maybe they will. You never know. But they take one day, and they don't even march you to a rock pile. They march you out into like the middle of a field, dirt field. Weird. And Chang and her defense lawyer were present at the trial, and a verdict will be announced at a later date. Oh, wow. They're giving her a little bit of a reprieve. Australian citizen Chang Li is suspected of committing the crime of illegally providing state secrets to foreign countries. And the case involves state secrets, so the court held the trial, Wang said at a daily ministry briefing. The parties concerned should earnestly respect China's judicial sovereignty and refrain from inferring in the law-based handling of cases by Chinese judicial organs in any way, he said. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I guess it makes sense if you speak Mandarin. Australian Foreign Minister Maurice Payne said in a statement that while Australia respects the sovereignty of China's legal system, Chang's case has, quote, lacked the transparency, and the Australian government has never been provided with details of the charges, end quote. Since Chang's detention, the Australian government has consistently stated the fundamental importance of procedural fairness, basic standards of justice, and China's international legal obligation, Payne said. Following Ms. Chang's trial, we renew our calls for China to uphold these principles and allow Ms. Chang unimpeded access to her lawyer. China does not recognize dual citizenship, and Chinese-born defendants are often not afforded the same treatment as other foreign nationals, particularly when facing espionage charges. The Committee to Protect Journalists listed China as the leading jailer of journalists in 2021 for the third year in a row, with 50 behind bars. Michael Kunzelman of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. A National Security Agency employee has been charged with emailing classified national security information to somebody who was not authorized to receive it, according to a federal indictment unsealed yesterday, Thursday. Mark Robert Unkenholz, age 60, of Hanover, Maryland, was arrested yesterday, Thursday, but ordered released after his initial court appearance in Baltimore. Unkenholz held top-secret security clearance, and that gave him access to the information, according to a 26-count indictment. He worked for an NSA office responsible for the agency's engagement with private industry. The indictment accuses Unkenholz of using his personal email address to send information classified as secret and top secret to somebody else's private company, email addresses on several occasions between February of 2018 and June of 2020. The recipient had held top-secret clearance from April 2016 until approximately June of 2019, when employed at a company that is not named in the indictment. However, from July of 2019 until approximately January of 2021, the person worked for a different company and was not authorized to access or receive classified information, the indictment says. So I wonder if Unkenholz knew that the guy or the recipient had transferred and worked for a different company, though wouldn't that be obvious by the email address that Unkenholz was sending to? We'll need to follow this if they don't clamp it down. But by dint of the fact that they released Unkenholz on his own recognizance, so to speak, I think that they have an idea about what went on. Larry Neumeister of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The author of a Pulitzer-prize winning book about the revolt at the Attica Correctional Facility in 1971 sued New York State prison authorities on Thursday yesterday, saying they've unconstitutionally banned her book behind bars. Author Heather Ann Thompson, a University of Michigan professor, brought the lawsuit in Manhattan federal court over the treatment by New York State Department of Corrections officials of her book, Blood in the Water, the Attica Prison Uprising of 1971, published in 2016. Named as defendants were the department's acting commissioner and a second official with decision-making authority regarding censorship determinations. The lawsuit contends that the ban is unconstitutional, particularly because the state has blocked inmates from accessing her book, prevented her from sharing it with inmates, and denied her an opportunity to contest the ban. People have a right to read, and people have a right to history, Thompson said in a release. We also have a right to have our books read. It's a shame we live in a country where we censor people and ideas. In a document issued in late January, the New York State Department of Corrections Divisions of Corrections and Community Supervision said it was department policy to encourage incarcerated individuals to read publications from varied sources if such material does not encourage them to engage in behavior that might be disruptive to orderly facility operations. The document said any materials also should not incite disobedience towards law enforcement officers or prison personnel. It added that incite disobedience means to advocate, expressly or by clear implication, acts of disobedience. Contacted about the lawsuit, a corrections spokesman said the department cannot comment on pending litigation because that's what they always say. The lawsuit was brought on Thompson's behalf by the New York Civil Liberties Union and the Civil Rights Clinic at the Benjamin N. Cardozo School of Law. NYCLU Executive Director Donna Lieberman said the state, quote, cannot censor an important historical text like Blood in the Water just because it doesn't like the content, end quote. Cardozo's Civil Rights Clinic Director Betsy Ginsburg said, quote, it is simply put a history book, and its denial to incarcerated people runs counter to this country's core values. Indeed. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, keeping up appearances. Sometimes the best crime movies are those that whisper rather than shout, and The Outfit is one of those. In his directorial debut, Oscar-winning screenwriter Graham Moore relies on understatement as opposed to effects or action scenes to tell the tale of a mild-mannered men's suit maker who finds himself entangled in a crime involving a powerful mobster in 1950 Chicago. The man, Leonard, played by Mark Rylance, is the sort who likes to maintain a low profile. Initially, we know little about Leonard other than he was originally a cutter on London's famed Savile Row, which is still known for its exquisite clothing for upper-income men. Somehow he's made his way to America to start over after the tragic loss of his family. Leonard always points out that he is a cutter, not a tailor, as the latter merely sews while a cutter actually designs from a client's individual measurements. Turns out that some of his newfound customers are Irish mobsters, but as he tells his assistant Mabel, played by Zoe Deutsch, it's not his job to judge. Rather, his goal was to make them look good. This theme of appearances versus reality is key in The Outfit, culminating in a surprising reveal in the last act about one character's past life. Rylan, who's primarily a stage actor, is a master of subtlety. He slowly reveals Leonard's inner life by the way he handles his shears, smooths the cloth, or lowers his gaze when when shady characters come in to make deposits in a local mob boss's drop box, which happens to be in Leonard's shop. Ryland pretty much carries this one with just a little but effective support. The outfit is much like one of Leonard's fashion creations, understated but elegant, with the quality evident in the details. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Within a few decades, global temperatures are expected to climb to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. And that's going to be really bad for corals, according to the latest report out from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change.
So the recent IPCC report says that up to 1.5, we can expect 10 to 30% coral survivorship. And above that, it decreases precipitously.
Andrea Grottoli is a distinguished professor at The Ohio State University. Amid the doom and gloom of the IPCC report, Grottoli has some rare good news. Corals may be more adaptable to future conditions than we thought. Her team studied 3 species of coral from the island of Oahu in Hawaii. They put them in tanks with either heat stress, more acidic water, or both.
And what really matters in this study is the one with both increases in temperature and ocean acidification, because that's exactly what's happening on reefs now.
22 months later, they assessed the winners and losers, and they found that on average, more than half the corals survived, even after being punished with those warmer, more acidic waters, the kind they'd face under 2 degrees of global warming.
The corals that survived, 2 of the 3 species were actually physiologically performing normally. They were doing more than surviving, right? They were coping, they'd acclimatized, they were doing well.
The results appear in the journal Scientific Reports. Grottoli says the study provides hope the world's corals may be more resilient than we thought, especially since one of the Hawaiian species they studied is widespread around the planet. But will this good news motivate world leaders to actually rein in warming? Well, corals may be able to wait just a little longer to find out. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Russia's disinformation campaign is winning inside Russia.
Listen up. This matters. I'm Louis Black, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
After invading Ukraine, Vladimir Putin shut down the one radio station and the one television station that had provided a platform for those who did not hew the government line. He severed access to Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and most recently, Instagram. And ominously and effectively, Putin made it a crime to in any way contradict the government's version of the government or his war, an offense punishable by 15 years in prison. Indeed, it is a violation of this new state security law to refer to Putin's war as a war or as an invasion instead of a special military operation. Meanwhile, Russia's state media is manufacturing lies, including that Ukraine is manufacturing chemical and biological weapons to use against Russia. The disparity, the dissonance between reality, between what the rest of the world understands Russia is doing in the Ukraine and what Russian people understand is happening, should make us appreciate yet again the singular importance of freedom of the press, the need for accuracy, and the dangers of propaganda. We thank all the brave reporters who are providing us all with facts.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union because freedom can't defend itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1929. It was the first day of the strike at the Luray Textile Mill in Gastonia, North Carolina. Textile mill workers in the South were paid significantly less than workers in the North. Child labor restrictions were not strictly enforced in many Southern mills. To make matters worse, in 1927, the company hired engineering experts to study the Luray Mill. Their goal was to figure out how to drive down labor costs even further. The plan they concocted was called stretching out. Under the stretching out system, each worker had to keep an eye on more spindles for the same pay. Pleased with the idea, the company laid off a third of its workforce. When the National Textile Workers Union came to town for an organizing drive, the workers were more than ready to strike. Vera Buck-Weisbord, one of the union organizers, recalled, "The women talked about the stretch out, how you needed roller skates to run from one side to another. You couldn't cover so many. They talked about how their children would get sick, and it was so hard to give them any care." The strike soon became violent. The mill bosses evicted strikers from their company housing. Masked men destroyed the union headquarters. A gunfight broke out at a strike camp, wounding several. A police officer was killed. Dozens of strikers were arrested, but no one was convicted. After the shooting of the officer, violence against the strikers increased. One day, a strike organizer and labor musician, Ella Mae Wiggins, was shot on the way to a rally. She had 5 children. No one was convicted in her case either. Sadly, after her death, the strike was defeated. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 33 degrees Fahrenheit, though we are expecting a high a bit warmer than yesterday, bumping 70, with sunshine and clouds mixed throughout the day, winds out of the north at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Lows will be in the upper 30s, low 40s tonight, with partly cloudy skies early, and will give way to cloudy skies late, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10, and then some clouds in the morning. Tomorrow will give way to mainly sunny skies in the afternoon, with highs in the upper 60s, low 70s, winds light and variable, though we are expecting a bit of rain on Sunday and Monday, so we'll see how that turns out. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon, yes, continue to rise. We now stand at 426,003 infections confirmed, with our deceased increasing by 1, which now stands at 511. Looks like grass pollen is moderate right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index is good at 24 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is moderate because of a solar flare stripping away our atmosphere. There were no northern lights last night, but it is that coronal mass ejection is supposed to have somewhat of an effect on us. But we stand at level 5 for that daytime UV index. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.15 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 92%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowd sources from around the world. London is 45 and partly cloudy. Paris, oh my God, it's 33 with a mix of rain and snow. Rome is 57 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 50 degrees and cloudy. Kabul is 60 and clear. Hong Kong is 61 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 44 and fair. Sydney, Australia is 65 and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 48 and partly cloudy. And New York, New York is 52 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that crowdsources from around the world. Well, as even more evidence that one needs more coffee before beginning West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy in the morning, I jumped ahead and missed this first offering that I had in the Bistro Cafe, but we're going to pick it up here at the chef's table. And it is by Josh Israel out of the American Independent. Republican Dave McCormick has been touting himself as a former Army Ranger in a Senate primary campaign, but the Connecticut-based hedge fund CEO turned Pennsylvania candidate never earned that title. McCormick is one of several Republicans seeking his party's nomination to replace retiring Senator Pat Toomey. At a March 14 meet and greet in Grove City, Pennsylvania, McCormick told voters, "I was the co-captain of the wrestling team at West Point. I went to the 82nd Airborne Division. I was a Ranger, and I served in the 82nd Airborne Divisions, which is one of the great divisions in our country." He repeated the nearly identical line at a March 5th campaign appearance in Edinburgh, Pennsylvania. And McCormick reportedly used a similar line at another February appearance. You've got guys like Fetterman, who was walking around with the tattoos and the shirts and all that stuff and really representing himself as a badass. Then you got the guy who was an Army Ranger, who actually went into combat and actually is one. McCormick also referred to himself as a paratrooper and a ranger in a March 15th interview on The Mark Levin Show. But the Army Special Operations Command holds that only military members who serve or served in the Army's 75th Ranger Regiment can call themselves a U.S. Ranger. While McCormick never served in the 75th, he did complete the Army's Ranger Corps training program in 1988 that would only entitle McCormick to say he was Ranger qualified according to U.S. military standards.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Susan Frazier of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Turkish prosecutor in the case against 26 Saudi nationals charged in the slaying of WAPO columnist Jamal Khashoggi made a surprise request that their trial in absentia be suspended and the case transferred to Saudi Arabia, raising fears of a possible coup. The panel of judges made no ruling on the prosecutor's request, but said a letter would be sent to Turkey's Justice Ministry seeking an opinion on the possible transfer of the file to Saudi judicial authorities. The development comes as Turkey has been trying to normalize its relationship with Saudi Arabia, which hit an all-time low following Khashoggi's grisly October 2018 killing. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu said in an interview that Saudi authorities were more cooperative on judicial issues with Turkey, but did not elaborate. Indeed. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.